All right, welcome back to Redneck Rantings. It is whatever day of the week it is, April 2019. We got us a brand new rant. I know it's been a few days since I did one of these. I spent the weekend fighting some kind of god-awful stomach bug, so I haven't been able to really do much of anything. I've been trying to recover from that, and, well, adult responsibilities have an unfortunate way of getting in the way of one's hobbies, which this channel amounts to. Want to talk tonight about Easter worshipers. Unless you have spent the holiday weekend living in a gopher hole with no internet access, you are no doubt aware of the disgusting, appalling, entirely repugnant tragedy that occurred in Sri Lanka, where Muslim terrorists, let me say it again, Muslim terrorists murdered Christians at worship. Okay? Again, I'm going to say the words, Muslim terrorists murdered Christian worshipers during Easter celebration. Body count is somewhere north of 200. For those of you who, for whatever reason, aren't aware of it, various terrorists walked into various places of worship wearing suicide vests, shouted their favorite catchphrase, boom, blew themselves up, murdered women, murdered children, murdered people who were trying to pray and celebrate the resurrection of Christ. Now, I'm Wiccan. Honestly, the Bible doesn't have any more spiritual significance to me than a Batman comic. Less, actually, because I actually, try to model my life after Batman, do the right thing, and stick up for people. But, just like with the New Zealand Christchurch massacre, it's a disgusting, appalling, bloody act of barbarism. And if hell exists, I really hope that the people responsible are on a slow spit right now. And it was purely and simply a religiously motivated attack by religious extremists, which, in this particular case, claimed the lives of more people than were murdered in the Christchurch mass shootings. Okay? I'm not trying to diminish what happened at the Christchurch mosque mass shootings in New Zealand. Those were also disgusting attacks, and I really hope that the government of New Zealand throws a rope over a lamppost and sends the son of a bitch who did that swinging. But what happened in Sri Lanka was an act of religiously motivated terrorism, okay? And it was an act of terrorism perpetrated by Muslims against Christians. What I want to talk about is the use of the phrase Easter worshipers by assorted members of the left when they were sending out the obligatory thoughts and prayers messages. Most prominently, former President Barack Obama, who I am increasingly more ashamed of having voted for twice, and presidential wannabe and, frankly, embarrassment to the Democratic Party, and reason I personally left the Democratic Party, Hillary Clinton. Okay? Their quotes were almost word for word, "Our hearts go out to the Easter worshipers who were harmed in the Sri Lanka attacks." Look, these were not Easter worshipers. These were not people worshiping Easter. These were Christians, worshipers and followers of the Christian faith, who were murdered while celebrating one of the holiest days of the Christian year, the resurrection of Christ and his subsequent ascension to heaven for mankind's sins. And a subhuman, degenerate animal walked into their church, just like that diseased piece of filth in New Zealand, and murdered them. Murdered women, murdered children, murdered unarmed men who were doing nothing more than exercising their absolute, innate human right to worship according to the dictates of their conscience. And a lot has been made about, well, why did they say Easter worshipers instead of Christians when the New Zealand shooting was all about Muslim when talking about the victims? The reason for that comes down to the power of language. for whatever reason, the political left has designated the Islamic community a official victim class, even though when you look at the numbers, Islamism is responsible by a huge margin, like we're talking multiples, more acts of religiously motivated violence and religiously targeted violence than Christians on a global scale, okay? Globally, Christianity is not the oppressor. Globally, Christianity is the victim. More Christians have been killed in the last 2 years in acts of religiously motivated violence than Muslims. And almost without exception, the people engaging in the violence have been Islamists, have been members of the Muslim faith, Muslim extremists who are taking a very far-end approach to their faith. I don't have a problem with moderate Muslims who just want to, pray 5 times a day, not drink alcohol, not eat pork, and live their lives. Those people, hey, you know what? You want to be friends? We can hang out. But the reality is that Islamist extremisms are far and away the largest number perpetrators of acts of religiously motivated violence, and their victims, by, again, a huge margin, tend to be Christians, okay? And the left, and in their most prominent faces, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, are trying to steer the narrative that way. What they are trying to do is they're trying to use the power of language to dissociate the concept of victimhood from the title of Christian, okay? From the group identity of being a member of the Christian faith. They don't want people to associate the word Christian with the word victim. Because if that happens, then this whole bullshit fairy tale made-up narrative of the Christians as the oppressors and the perpetrators and the bullies and the ones who are really engaging in the violence in this world falls apart like a house of cards in a wind tunnel, all right? And this is a very insidious, very evil thing. It's part of why I no longer really consider myself a significant member. It's why I really don't consider myself an adherent to a lot of to modern-day leftism. Because what these people are trying to do is they're trying to rewrite the dictionary. They are trying to use words to convince people that things that simply aren't the case are so. All right? When Muslims are attacked for their religion, it is of course a crime and it is of course a tragedy, and those responsible do need to be brought to justice. I don't care what way, I don't care what direction it's coming from. It can be from Christians, Buddhists, Jews, my own Wiccan faith, whoever you are. If you target Muslims specifically because they happen to be Muslims, you're a criminal, you need to go to jail, possibly go to the chair. And the media makes a big deal about associating victimhood with Muslims. When it's a Muslim victim, they say Muslim, 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 and they repeat it so it gets in your head, because that furthers their narrative that Muslims and Islamists are the oppressed victim in society. The same way when the Orlando shooting happened and that scumbag walked into a gay bar and blasted the place up and murdered all those people, they didn't talk about club goers or bar attendees or say that, our hearts go out to the people who were dancing that night. No, they said very specifically the LGBTQ community, because they wanted to associate LGBTQ with victimhood, which, fair enough. Even though I know a lot of really badass gays and lesbians, the reality is they still get victimized, and they are not perpetrators of a lot of violence in the opposite direction. They don't go out, roaming packs of gays, straight bashing heteros like myself. So that's legitimate. But what the left is trying to do is they are trying to steer our psyches away. And this is not, some bullshit tinfoil hat conspiracy theory other people besides myself have pointed this out. What they are trying to do is steer the general social consciousness away from the concept of Christians as victims. Because what they're trying to sell is a bill of goods wherein Christianity is the oppressor, wherein the bad guys, the bullies, are Christians. And the math simply doesn't follow that. The math says that statistically, if you are a Christian, you are way more likely on a global scale, maybe not here in America, but in general, on a global scale, as a Christian, you have a numerically higher chance of being subject to religiously motivated violence and possibly being murdered specifically because of your faith than if you are a Muslim. And the left doesn't want us to realize that. They don't want us to acknowledge that. They don't want the group identity, the theological tribalism, because humans are tribal creatures. They don't want Christians to develop a tribal view of, hey, wait a minute, my people are being victimized. They don't want people in Christian majorities, in Christian majority nations, to look around and go, hey, wait a minute, we're the ones who are being victimized. We need to stand up and fight back. Because for whatever reason, they have latched onto this idea that that they want to sell to us the idea that Muslims are oppressed minorities. And the fact is that they are not. You go onto social media, and I've said this before, you go onto social media anywhere, it can be Facebook, Twitter, wherever, the best way, one of the best ways to get to get a community strike, to get a ban, to get a suspension of your privileges, is to criticize Islam. Look at what happened to Tommy Robinson, okay? Tommy Robinson was more or less kicked off the internet because of his persistent and ongoing criticisms of Islam. And the left has allied themselves with this ideology for reasons that I'm willing to speculate in another video, but we're going 12 minutes here and I got to take a shower and get to bed for work. And if they don't consistently sell this idea of Islam and Muslims and Islamists as the victims, then their bill of goods falls apart and nobody's going to buy it anymore. Nobody's going to vote for them. All right? And what's going to happen is that Christians in Christian majority countries, like the United States, are going to rise up and say, no, we have had enough. We are going to push back, and we are not going to buy your bullshit anymore. So pay attention to the words that people are saying. Look at where and when and how people say certain things. Ask yourself, if this had been a case of some sicko suicide bombing a mosque, do you honestly think that they would have said, you know, our hearts go out to the followers of the Quran or the Mohammed worshippers? No. They would have said Muslim, 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 Muslim. Because they want to sell the narrative of Muslims as victims, and they want to dissociate and disconnect your mind from the idea of Christians as victims, which is what is really going on. Statistically, Christians are far and away the victim class when it comes. They are the most religiously persecuted of all of the faiths in the world when it comes to religiously targeted violence. The left does not want you to acknowledge that, and that is why they are choosing their words. It's not a coincidence that so many people use the exact same phrase on the exact same incident. So, that's my rant for tonight. Why are they doing this? Why are they trying to pitch the idea that the people who are more likely, according to the math, to be victimized for their faith are actually the oppressors and the bullies? Ask yourself that question. Think about it. Rant over. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. And as always, if there's something else you'd like me to go off about, by all means, please mention it in the comments section below. Y'all have a wonderful night. Take care.